practices that were identified. If I went through all 40, it would be a 2-hour meeting. Jeff Zampatelli here, he's the chair of the parking committee for the Downtown Partnership, and he can tell you it was a 2-hour-long meeting for all 40. So I'm just going to go through the ones that rose to the top of the list as ideas that the Downtown Partnership would like to pursue a little bit further. The first one was increasing parking fees. So this might not be increasing parking fees on the street necessarily, but maybe in the parking garage. In downtown Tampa, unlike other cities, it's cheaper to park in a parking garage than it is to park on the street. In most cities, it's cheaper to park in the in most cities, it's more expensive to park on the street than it is in the parking garage. So we have it backward here. So if you increase revenues, you can invest that back into perhaps more meters, paying for new street patrols, providing streetscaping, making it more comfortable for people to walk. Reinvesting that money can make it more palatable for the businesses, which might be affected by the higher parking meter rates, but it will foster some goodwill. Another solution was doing on-street angled parking. So doing parallel parking, changing that to angled parking, doubles the overall on-street supply of parking. Now, you can't do it on every street in downtown, obviously, because you have a width issue, but there are certain streets in downtown where this can happen. In addition, parking is faster and it's easier, and it's also, unfortunately, it's known to increase the rate of collisions. However, it reduces the severity. As people are backing out of the parking space, they may not see the car coming from behind them. Another one was doing remote parking and shuttle service, and this is being looked at now. There are some lots in Tampa Heights, Channel Side, parking garages where we can provide shuttle service into downtown. So this is a solution that is being looked at currently. So using parking lots which are further away as overflow parking, providing free shuttle service to the places of employment in downtown. Also looking at advanced parking management systems, so using technologies such as parking sensors, information monitors, video cameras, and satellite radios to identify where spaces are located and direct drivers to those spaces, perhaps using phone-based technologies like apps that you can log into. It'll tell you exactly which parking garages have spaces available, even which floor they're available at, and in some parking garages around the country, it will direct you exactly to the parking space in the garage with a light. Once you enter the garage, there's a green light which will direct you exactly where you need to go. So using technologies like that. Also, another thing that we looked at was eliminating parking requirements. There are dozens of urban core areas, typically downtowns, which are eliminating parking requirements and letting the market dictate what the parking need is. So financial institutions often will not write a mortgage or a loan for a new project unless they have particular parking standards built into the financing agreement. So taking government control away and giving it to the financial institution, the builder, the developer, to determine how much parking they need versus telling you how much parking you need. As I said, it typically works around urban centers, higher density mixed-use areas, and transit stations. Another thing that we looked at was the federal commuter benefit. This is similar to a health savings account. So up to $255 a month IRS allowance before taxes for commuter benefit, either by driving or taking transit. Previous to this year, transit was not on par with driving. So if you took transit to work, you didn't get $255. It was like $130 or $120. It was really low, but the federal government changed the rules so that driving or taking transit is equal now. Companies can save about 7.65% in payroll taxes, and employees can save up to 40% on commuting expenses by having this federal tax benefit. It is a voluntary program. However, some cities such as New York, Washington, D.C., and San Francisco have made it a law that any company with more than 10 or more employees have to offer this to their workers. We've heard from businesses in Tampa who offer it to their workers that it's very cumbersome. Hillsborough County Board of County Commissioners used to offer it to employees. However, the paperwork involved was enormous and outrageous. Perhaps there need to be some changes at the federal level, but we believe that at least marketing this a little bit more to local businesses could help employers and employees in the downtown area. We also looked at demand-priced parking. So comparing the actual parking occupancy to the desired parking occupancy. So looking at a particular block, perhaps in a downtown area, and changing the price based on the time of day and the demand. There are certain times of day which there's higher demand, so increase the price to allow for an ample turnover. If you're a business owner, you've got perhaps a hair salon, you want to make sure there's a parking spot in front of your business. If you have 25 cents for an hour parking, someone's going to park there all day long, whereas if you have perhaps $2, it's going to have turnover, and you're going to have people coming and going, and there's going to be spots available for your customers. This is something that we're looking at, and the parking department is now investigating ways to implement dynamic price parking. So there's a possibility for this to take place in downtown. It's only in the very beginning stages of being studied. Another solution was to parking taxes. So there are two types. One is a commercial parking tax, and this is similar to a sales tax. Every time you park your car in a privately owned parking lot, there is a special tax added to your parking fee. Or there's the per space parking levy, which is similar to a property tax. So that particular parking space is taxed on an annual basis. And the reason for this is to recapture a lot of the tax revenue that's typically captured by brick and mortar storefronts. So if you have, say, I don't know, a retail store that sells clothing, you're going to have sales taxes coming in. But if you have a vacant lot that's just doing parking, you're not generating the same amount of sales tax revenue. You're not generating property tax revenue if there was actually brick and mortar storefront there. So trying to recapture some of that. What this does is it incentivizes development on surface parking lots. So it makes it less desirable to have that parking lot remain vacant, and hopefully that owner, whoever owns that parking lot, is incentivized or encouraged to develop that parking lot. In some cities, they'll waive the parking tax for private parking lot owners who develop or build structured parking. So there's a need for parking garages. That parking tax can be waived for those developers who build that structured parking. And then, of course, we have the concept of shared parking, which a lot of people are familiar with. So you have two or more businesses using the same parking lot. We do have some of this in downtown Tampa. There are agreements. You're seeing it more and more throughout the Tampa Bay region. However, a lot of our land development codes kind of are apprehensive to implement this. So looking at different peak periods. So if you have a restaurant, you might be busy on a Friday night at 8 o'clock, but that business, a commercial business that might be there, in office use, Friday night at 8 o'clock, there's nobody there working. I mean, you got a couple crazies that are probably working on Friday at 8 o'clock, but there's a chance to share parking between different uses based on the hours that they typically operate. Unbundling parking, so renting or selling parking separately from the actual apartment or condo. Most parking spaces cost about, structured parking costs $25,000 to $30,000 per space. If you're selling a condo in downtown Tampa with 2 parking spaces, you're adding about $60,000 to the cost of a downtown condo. If you offer the purchaser the option to perhaps buy 1 space versus 2, you could save them $30,000 on the price of the purchase. Or say they don't want a car, they don't own a car. Maybe they're going to use car sharing or use Uber, or they're going to take the bus everywhere. You could save $60,000 on the purchase price of the condo. The same goes for rent. A lot of times the cost of the parking is included in the rent. You have a $1,000 rent. Perhaps the person doesn't own a car. Take $200 off, the rent is only $800. So it saves the user or the renter some money. Those parking spaces can then be rented to somebody else who might not live in the building, perhaps a business that's located nearby. Parking garages, these take a long time to build, very hard to finance, but it's something that perhaps downtown might need to look at in the future to build more of, but it's listed in the best practices. We also identified funding mechanisms. I'm not going to go through all of these, but they're listed on your screen. You were also provided a packet which includes the downtown best practices manual. Looks like this. I know it was in your packet because I helped put it in there. All 40 are in there, as well as the funding mechanisms, so I encourage you to take a look at those. We also worked with the University of South Florida Masters of Urban and Regional Planning program to help develop perhaps some future studies to help downtown. Of all of the studies that were submitted by the students, 2 were selected that we hope to carry out in the next year. The Planning Commission and MPO, we have planning interns. We're going to hopefully use those interns to carry out some of these studies. The first one was looking at where visitors are parking, or employees are parking, where they're going, how far they're walking to their destinations, and identifying improvements along those pathways to make it more comfortable to walk and encourage people to walk. And then the second one was looking at parking garages and identifying how accessible they are, how efficient they are, the aesthetics, identifying safety issues with those garages, and hopefully indicating to the City of Tampa which improvements should be made to make parking a little more comfortable. The next steps were to study updating parking regulations in Tampa and suggest changes to the Land Development Code. We've met with the City of Tampa Development Services. They're not very keen on making any changes to the Land Development Code right now, but the Downtown Partnership will probably keep pushing. Recommendations from the Planning Commission staff were to do a comprehensive parking study for the downtown and urban core. This was just the best practices. You know, you can take these best practices, investigate them a little bit more, perhaps implement them, but downtown really needs a comprehensive parking study looking long term. How are we going to accommodate more growth, businesses moving into the area? We're losing a lot of businesses, a lot of offices to Brandon, West Shore area, to the suburbs because of the parking issue. Parking is expensive, their employees can't find parking, da-da-da-da-da. If there's a parking study which can identify new resources, ways to get people to downtown, that could help. But we also encourage investments in parking and transit. We found of all the cities that we looked at, dozens and dozens of cities, those are the most thriving are cities that have a comprehensive parking and transit system. So you have to have both operating together to create a successful, thriving downtown. And unfortunately, at this time, Tampa doesn't have either, just to be very blunt. So that concludes my presentation. I'm here to answer any questions if you have them. But as I said, the best practices study was included in your packet. And if you want to take a look at it, ask questions of me later, I'm happy to do that. Yes?
We could probably spend an entire meeting talking about parking. Thank you for the presentation. Thanks to the Downtown Partnership for initiating this activity. I would like the partnership in conjunction with the Planning Commission to let us know if they have yet developed a comprehensive guiding strategy to how the downtown should combine transit and parking, so that as the downtown develops, which it's doing pretty rapidly now, there'll be some principles and some specifics that go into the land use code that will help us say, here's where parking is going to be needed, here's how that matches up with transit, whether it be hard or some other form. But I think that's part of what's lacking. Do you agree, or is that in place?
I agree, and as we suggested, we really need a comprehensive parking study for downtown, which would look at the transit and the parking options 2, 5, 10, 20 years out in the future to accomplish that.
So how is that study to be accomplished?
There's a financing need. They're very expensive studies, and they're time consuming, but the partnership is seriously considering that. I know that the partnership has also spoke with the Channel District and the Ybor City Development Corporation to perhaps partner on a study which would be not just downtown, but the entire urban core.
We're supposed to know how that progresses.
Will do. Yes.
One thing that makes me nervous of the partnership, not to be pretty transparent with you, is that I think sometimes they get above themselves with low-income individuals. I mean, if you increase the fees, it's a harder burden for these low-income individuals. I mean, let's think about it. To even visit your county commissioner, you have to pay. You have to pay to park somewhere. It's almost like a tax to speak to somebody. I saw them there increasing parking fees, increasing citations. Is there more ability to lean towards more of finding better incentives? I mean, you know, what can we do for our low income individuals? Parking, I mean, coming here, you have to come here sometimes. Or house, county center for some reason, you know,
I think those are great things to look at. We really haven't looked at the low income factor of, you know, what that would do as far as raising fees, but I think that's something important, and I appreciate your suggestion.
Thank you.
To follow up on Dave's comment, I mean, that is an important comment. I mean, I kind of cringed when I saw the suggestion of raising citation amounts and raising parking rates arbitrarily, because as a commercial realtor, I think the objective is to bring people to downtown for recreation and business. And if there's a disincentive built into the strategy, which is why I asked about the strategy, to guard against penalizing low-income people or any coming into downtown. I think those thoughts back to the partnership community.
Yes, sir.
I can appreciate that there is a need to study and modify the parking in the downtown area. I am concerned, however, that you voiced the opinion that losing businesses, quote unquote, to Brandon and West Shore creates a problem, because I would think a dispersal of business centers in the area would also help alleviate some of the congestion on the roads and cut down on commuting. So I don't really see why having those businesses move becomes a problem for your parking.
It doesn't become a problem for the parking, it's just the downtown partnership. And even the city of Tampa is trying to encourage the redevelopment of downtown, and having more businesses and residents in downtown meets that goal to create a thriving community, walkable, a place where you can live, work, and play.
Well, with the increase of new business coming to the area and significant new population, to have people both coming into the area from outside the area and businesses expanding into the more suburban areas, isn't that more of a symbiotic effect as opposed to it's now creating a problem for those businesses to leave?
No, you definitely have a point. What I've heard speaking with leasing agents in downtown is there's a huge demand to move to downtown. When a corporation or a company looks at moving to the Tampa Bay area, they want to be in downtown. But when they look at all of the factors involved and the costs involved, parking, the lack of transit, sometimes the lack of housing, the cost of housing, they're forced to move to other places, even though where they really want to be is in downtown Tampa. So creating a strategy for downtown parking, that's one strategy to help bring businesses to downtown where they want to be.
Again, I agree that some parking aspects need to be looked at. I was just concerned with the perspective of it being a problem.
My last one is one comment actually. I like that you said that there needs to be comprehensive parking and transit. I'm stealing. And the next thing was, I'm not sure if the partnership, when they spoke to you about it, but there was a law firm, I forgot what it was called, but they left downtown and they moved to Brandon. And with so many law firms, lobbying groups, like Southern Strategy Group, Adam Priest, for that powerful law firm to move to Brandon, I think that's a very important. There needs to be an understanding of why they actually moved, or maybe you know, because I'd imagine downtown would be a staple of where they would want to be, especially with a powerful law firm, but still moving to Brandon. Didn't you see? I think like Gray something in there.
And they're not the only one. There have been other companies that have left the downtown area. One, because of access, it's difficult to get into downtown in many cases. Two, because of parking. A lot of times they're upper employees, the executives have parking provided for them free of charge, but their lower paid employees, talking like $35,000 and under, are having to pay for parking. And they're having to walk blocks and blocks. And they find that to be a disadvantage, or it's not desirable for their employees. So that has a lot to do with it. Also, of course, rent is cheaper in the suburban areas. So they might be looking at the long-term cost of rent. But there are a lot of different factors involved in why a business moves out of downtown, not just parking, but there are other reasons too.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you very much for this presentation. It's very interesting. Do you have any idea how much a study, the comprehensive parking study that you're talking about, would cost? Did y'all look at that?
We've spoken with a couple consultants, and we're hearing numbers anywhere from $80,000 to $120,000. So it's pricey.
Ultimately, it's just a matter of physics. I mean, we can only fit so many cars in this little part of town. Isn't that just a problem?
You know, the partnership and planning commission, after looking at available parking, believes that there is parking available. Yes, in some places there might need to be some additional parking spaces constructed, maybe a parking garage, or I don't know. But there is parking. It's just getting people to it. So there's a lot of parking available on the outskirts. It's bringing people into the core where parking doesn't exist. That's the issue. The Downtown Partnership has this new electric vehicle program, which might help, but perhaps there needs to be a shuttle service, a real bus that's bringing people to and from.
You know, it's interesting. Just the other day, I was trying to figure out if I could take transit to get my daughter from Rampello to the Strauss Center for an after-school program. I would go with her, of course. I'm not going to send an 8-year-old by herself. And I couldn't figure out how to do it. There's no way to do it. I can imagine a big rectangle. I don't know. Maybe, I mean, I'm just talking. I don't know. But something like that, it seems like we need it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I think Ms. Wesneski.
I just wanted to applaud you for looking around the country at best practices. I thought it was really well done. I think more of our planning folks here in campus should look outside of the area and what other folks are doing for audience.
We looked at Europe and Australia as well, so we looked much further outside of the country.
I mean, half your problems can be solved with transit. I mean, you're trying to solve parking problems with only half a toolbox. So we all know what the problem is. It's always transit. Everything in Tampa comes down to transit. And transit is not a magic bullet, but it helps with everything else, and then it lets you solve more problems because you can then combine that with your other toolbox. So you guys are, well, you got these 40 best practices. Half of them are eliminated because you don't have transit, and then the other half you're just trying to figure out ways to put this stuff together. So I applaud you for putting this stuff together and getting into 40 practices, and it just shows the fact that we need transit to solve the problems that we have and to let our community be a lot more prosperous. So it's really good to keep that on the forefront of every study that we do because it's so important, because you're the last one to do it in the top 30 metros. You're the last. So I'm glad that we got that, and that helps with every solution. It's part of every solution to all of our problems that we face today. And so putting this on every study is definitely something that's really important. The other thing I want to talk about is, being an architect, the developers removing that parking requirement, that stops so much development by having a parking requirement for the small scale projects as well as the large scale projects. It should be market driven, especially in the urban core. You'll see, you drive down streets and you'll see buildings that are, well, why isn't this building being put back into service? Why can't people live in this building, existing buildings? And the answer is always inevitably is stormwater and parking. And parking is such an important piece to this. And if you let that be market driven, then a lot of these problems go away, and you're going to see a lot more of your buildings get put back into use and contributing structures to the urban fabric. So
A lot of historic buildings are in that situation that they can't be redeveloped into something a little more intense and safe because they won't have the required parking. So they just sit there.
they would build one in another era where you didn't have a supermarket full of parking spaces in front of your building, built to the edge, and that's now they said because of the current way that we have structured our